What's up, everybody? Welcome in on this Sunday night to this edition of the Rebel Report. My name is Michael Borky. I'm so glad that you are with me, and I have a confession to make off the top. I am addicted to talking about playoff scenarios, resumes, debating the merits of one over another. I have had so much fun this weekend just talking about college football. Not even like here, which I love doing it here too. We'll do a lot of it on the radio show tomorrow, obviously, but just like on Twitter or like with friends, talking about college football right now is so much fun for me. And look, I know that this is an Ole Miss-based podcast, and it seems like Ole Miss is going to be on the outside looking in. I think Andy Staples' bracket, unfortunately for Ole Miss, is going to be the correct one, in which Ole Miss is the last team out of the bracket. I think that is ultimately what's going to happen. However, the discussion, the discourse, the games, the meaning behind all of them it's a blast to discuss, and I have had so much fun. I mean, I've got South Carolina fans in my mentions right now trying their hardest, and as they should, by the way, as they absolutely should. I don't fault them for this whatsoever. But I've got Gamecock fans in my mentions right now trying to twist their minds into pretzels, avoiding a 24-point home loss to a team currently ranked in front of them. I mean, I've even got guys talking about, well, everybody knows that the refs screwed us, and so that should be the difference. I mean, it's so irrational and also fun, and it's great. I'm so glad that we get to do this now in college football. Could you imagine if we just had a 14 playoff, what this past weekend would have been like? It would have been horrible. It would have just been absolutely horrible. None of the games would have mattered. And what's so funny is the anti-expansion people had the argument of, well, the Ohio State-Michigan game's not going to matter at all. Did you watch? Because that game felt like everything. Players got pepper sprayed on the field after that game. I mean, Ryan Day looks like hell, and the pressure is mounting in unbelievable ways. Even that game mattered a little bit less, I guess. But with what happened on the field and the reaction to follow, that doesn't even track either. I have had so much fun talking about all of this, and hope you guys have as well. I cannot stop talking about the playoffs, and we'll do that tonight with you guys, of course, as well. There are two things that are bothering me lately, though. Two things that are bothering me lately. One of them is the Ole Miss fan that anytime anybody brings up playoff scenarios of any kind, immediately goes, oh, well, we don't deserve it, so don't talk about it. I'm not entertaining that person. Of course, Ole Miss doesn't deserve to make the playoff. Either does Alabama. Either does South Carolina. Either does Miami. Either does Arizona State, unless they win their conference, which even still, I don't think just winning your conference should get you a bid anyway. Nobody deserves it. That's not the conversation. If Ole Miss does not make the playoff, and it certainly looks like they're not going to, the first place they should look to blame for missing the playoff is a mirror. Absolutely, it's totally, completely their fault if they don't make the playoff, which again, it seems likely. It is exclusively their fault. Don't lose at home to Kentucky. It's that simple. Win that game that you should have won and you did not. And we're talking about seeding today as opposed to them being on the outside looking in. But who cares if they deserve it or not? Did the 2022 baseball team deserve to make the playoff? Did they deserve it? No, they did not. But look at what happened when they got there. They won an entire national championship. So trying to shut people talking about playoffs down because they don't deserve it, that you're just like a glutton for misery. Let people have fun. This is fun. No, Ole Miss doesn't deserve it, but nobody else around them on the rankings deserves it either. I certainly do not blame Lane Kiffin at all, for example, for trying to go to bat for his team. Now, again, he should have just not lost to Kentucky, but like he should be doing that. Brett Bielema should be quoting what Lane said and having his opinion about it, and them going back and forth, and Texas Tech's coach talking about how, well, the Big 12 is actually good because a team that left the conference is going to win the SEC this year because, okay. But all of this should happen. Let people talk about it. It's the whole deserve thing. I find, a little ridiculous. Of course they don't deserve it, but it doesn't matter. What matters is, do you get in or not? And should you get in or not based on the criteria and the teams that you are arguing with in order to get that spot? And the second thing that I have noticed that has bothered me a little bit lately is people are avoiding the most objective of measures. And that really bothers me. I'm not talking about fans, right? Like Ole Miss fans arguing in favor for Ole Miss to make the playoff should omit some things like the Kentucky loss, right? You should try to downplay that as much as humanly possible. South Carolina fans arguing for their inclusion in the playoff should absolutely twist their minds into pretzels to explain why they should jump two teams that they lost to in order to make the playoff. Fans should do that. What I have not liked is people in my business, media people with platforms that are deciding to take what happened on the actual football field away from the discussion. And these are the same people that argued the anti-expansionists that didn't want playoff expansion because they wanted what happened on the field in the regular season to matter so much. It's the same people that want that principle, but also say things like South Carolina should jump two teams that beat them this season. Now, if you have teams with resumes that are completely not comparable with a head-to-head situation, then sure. Like you wouldn't rank Kentucky in front of Ole Miss. You wouldn't rank Vanderbilt in front of Alabama because their resumes otherwise are so dramatically different that you have to take the head-to-head result and look at it differently because of the other factors being so wide. But when you have three SEC teams with the same record, and yes, the resumes, there are slight differences. Like Ole Miss has the worst loss of the three, right? Ole Miss has the best win, I think. Anyway, Clemson should really fall off. Ole Miss will have the best win compared to South Carolina. The resumes are slightly different. South Carolina's strength of record is a little bit better than that of Ole Miss's, but Ole Miss's game control is better than South Carolina's. Like when the resumes are, when you're really splitting hairs about, well, this team lost to LSU and this team lost to Florida and this team lost to, and like they're all kind of similar, right? They're in the same ballpark. The strength of schedule is, 10 spaces apart. The strength of record is 10 spaces apart. One team has a win that's better, but a loss that's worse. When you've got comparable resumes, you should not ignore the head-to-head result on the field, the most objective measure of football teams is what they did against each other on the field. And to set that aside because of vibes I find that to be a real problem. I think that sets a really bad precedent where you can have teams with identical records in the same conference with resumes that are generally close enough, and you throw the head-to-head result between the two teams out of the window because I just feel like this team's better right now. I think that sets a very bad precedent. Removing what happened on the field is a problem, and you should not do that. If you have teams that did not play each other, then you have to go to more subjective things like strength of schedule, ranked wins, stuff like that. But when two teams played each other, when Alabama and South Carolina played each other and Alabama beat South Carolina and they have an identical record and all of their other stuff is very similar, Alabama is ranked ahead of South Carolina. That's how it should always be because the game on the field has to matter the most. Ole Miss and South Carolina have identical records, right? They have similar resumes. Now, again, South Carolina doesn't have the bad loss, but Ole Miss has a better win, right? But Ole Miss went to South Carolina and beat them by 24 points. And if you have to twist your brain into a pretzel to, well, South Carolina's quarterback was a little banged up, but he played every single snap in the game. But that counts for something. And South Carolina, they're playing a little bit better lately, which they are. I mean, they're playing good football lately. But Ole Miss beat Georgia 3 weeks ago by 18 points. So this idea that these teams played each other on the field, but just the vibes are driving me to think that South Carolina is better. That sets a really bad precedent, and I don't think that is healthy. Eliminating completely the result on the field when the teams played each other, that's not good. That's not a precedent that you want to set at all if you're just going on vibes. South Carolina played Alabama. Had a chance to beat them. They didn't. South Carolina played Ole Miss at home, and they got beat by 4 scores. Completely and totally dominated from the very second the ball was snapped. That's got to count more than anything else. That's got to count more than one team having a worse loss than the other. That's got to count more than one team having a better win than the other, or a strength of schedule being 10 points higher out of 132 or whatever it is. The head-to-head result has to matter the most. That has to carry the most weight of it all. And the people that are arguing otherwise I don't quite understand it. South Carolina is like the flavor of the week. But, yeah, I don't think that sets a good precedent whatsoever. And frankly, it's kind of a goofy argument, in my opinion. What happened on the field has to matter. In terms of help, said it a second ago, but just to quickly go through it again, Ole Miss did not get the help that they needed. They got very close to getting the help that they needed. South Carolina beat Clemson in an ugly game. Now, Ole Miss needed to play much better as well to help this. They did not play well against Mississippi State. They still won the game, but still. South Carolina beat Clemson, but it was close and ugly. You had the Miami loss, which, by the way, Miami has no business being ranked ahead of the trio of teams in the SEC. They have no business whatsoever being ranked ahead of Alabama or Ole Miss or South Carolina. None, zero. Their resume has the bad. They have 2 unranked losses with 0 ranked wins. They have no business being in front of them. They'll probably end up being there, but they have no business being there. But you got a Miami loss, but you didn't really get anything else, right? You didn't get Notre Dame, USC, although USC, I guess, threw 2 pick sixes in the game. So Notre Dame didn't lose. Alabama didn't get beat by Auburn. Tennessee, Tennessee was getting blown out early, and then they ended up covering the spread in the game. So you didn't get help from Vanderbilt. You didn't get help, or what could have been help, from Georgia Tech. Just Ole Miss put their fate in the hands of too many people because they were not able to control their own destiny, and didn't get it done. Just simply could not get it done. And there is, I guess we'll see on Tuesday, but they didn't get the help that they needed. They didn't get the chaos that they needed, and they're going to get left at home. They're going to get left at home for the playoffs anyway. So we'll get to your messages after I tell you the podcast is presented by the Gregory Law Firm. DJ Gregory of the Gregory Law Firm has got you covered for all of your small business, personal injury, or contract disputes. Check him out, DJ Gregory, Gregory Law Firm, 662-397-9799. If you're a small business owner, you haven't needed legal advice yet, but that day may come. Save that number, 662-397-9799. If you've been personally injured, don't wait another second. Call the Gregory Law Firm. He can service you anywhere in the state of Mississippi. DJ Gregory, the Gregory Law Firm, presenting the Rebel Report. Simple answer, they didn't get enough help. Likely one upset away from any serious discussion. Yeah, if Tennessee loses to Vanderbilt, we're having a different conversation tonight, but they just didn't get enough. As long as SMU beats Clemson, Alabama will make it in. I don't want to hear any more about South Carolina. I agree that that's how it's going to happen. I think that that's how it's going to happen. Will the Grove Collective take a big hit? No, I don't think it'll take a big hit. Maybe it will be a little bit more difficult to fundraise than it was a year ago. But, for whatever it's worth, I have had good I have heard good things about their financial standing. Do they have $25 million to spend? No, but I don't think that they're struggling at the moment. I could be wrong, but I do think that you've had some. I have heard some confidence in their ability to close out this high school class strong and do well in the portal yet again. Got to wait until Yellowstone goes off before coming on live. I still haven't watched that yet. I need to, though. My dad keeps telling me to watch it. Don't think they're in this year, but with how the college football landscape is, you think with Kiffin as a coach, very likely to be in every other year or so. Yeah, just don't schedule difficult games anymore. I mean, the committee already told you don't schedule. Strength of schedule doesn't matter to them. It just simply doesn't matter. It doesn't. I mean, they've said it out loud. But yeah, get to 10 and you're in, basically. I mean, I know you're going to have some outlier years, but if you get to 10, you should feel very comfortable about your standing as an SEC team. And it's not going to stay at 12 for long. So in the future, if you get to 10, you're in. You are. Rivalry weekend after the Egg Bowl was phenomenal. 8 overtimes in Georgia Tech was insane. Yeah, and Georgia Tech got screwed, man. That pass interference, I know that there were some missed holdings and stuff, but that pass interference was awful. That would have ended the game. I mean, Georgia Tech gets a 4th down stop in their own end zone, and a phantom PI gets thrown, and just awful, just absolutely awful. I think Miami is clearly out. Their resume is awful. It is truly awful. Again, they have all of the bad and none of the good from the three-loss SEC teams. But the committee chair said himself, strength of schedule doesn't matter. He said you can't help who you play, which is such a joke, by the way. I mean, it's a farce. There's truth to it. Don't get me wrong. But if you are not at least using who you played as a measurement of how good a team is, then what are you doing? Again, the precedent that South Carolina jumping 2 teams that beat them with identical records would set, it's the same precedent here. You're just going to allow teams to schedule poorly and stack wins and just hand them rankings because of that. It's a bad precedent to set. We talk about Ole Miss being let down, but Ohio State is an embarrassment right now. Will Howard and Judkins have been very lackluster for them. Yeah, they have. Man, you know, I told the people on the radio show, and it got talked about on state message boards and all that stuff. You know, the other 2 people on the show kept telling me how wrong I was. Quinshon Judkins was not going to be the feature back at Ohio State with Travion Henderson there. It was not going to happen. It wasn't going to happen. It never was, and it didn't happen. And his stock has taken a hit. It has. He had moments, of course, but it was an underwhelming season for him. And it was an underwhelming season for Will Howard. And Ohio, you want to talk about squandering talent. Ohio State had more on offense. They had a more talented offense, I think. And Ole Miss would have dreamed to have that backfield anyway with Henderson as well. I know Ohio State got beat up on the offensive line, but they would have loved to have that offensive line as well. That was a brutal loss. The pressure on Ryan Day is indescribable. Ole Miss is the best 3-loss team. They have dominating wins over Georgia and South Carolina. They beat them way better than Alabama did. There shouldn't be a debate. Yeah, and it's almost like everybody's forgotten that Alabama 2 weeks ago got smoked by Oklahoma. I mean, that's just like, it's gone. It's like it never happened. You can make a case for Ole Miss being ahead of the 2 of them. What Ole Miss is going to run into with Alabama is Alabama's so. But, you know, I saw Kiffin share the tweet. Ole Miss has a worse loss than Alabama, and maybe that is the differentiator if the rest of it's kind of the same. But they have a common win against Georgia, and Ole Miss beat Georgia by more. Alabama beat the hell out of LSU. Ole Miss obviously did not. Ole Miss beat Oklahoma by 2 scores, and Alabama got beat by 3 scores. So, I mean, that their resumes kind of knock each other out, but with common opponents, I think Ole Miss has a wider margin. But maybe it's the loss, and also maybe it's the helmet that'll separate the two. I don't know. Does Ohio State make a move on Ryan Day after the playoffs? They aren't winning it. Does Ross Bjork have the guts to do something like that? Or more importantly, will the boosters tell Ross Bjork to do that? We'll see. I mean, Ryan Day is 47-1 against Big Ten teams not named Michigan. 47-1 against Big Ten teams not named Michigan. How about that? It's Alabama. Bama will always win out to go to these playoffs. We've seen it multiple years in the past when they didn't win the SEC. Yeah, if you flipped the schedules and the results of Ole Miss, Alabama, you want to bet Alabama would still be ahead? Maybe they deserve it this year. I mean, maybe, Alabama people will certainly argue that. But I think if you flipped the schedules, if you flipped the resumes but kept the helmets the same, Alabama would still be ahead. They have received the benefit of the doubt in the past. They're going to get it this time as well. Lane's fault for not making the playoff. Worst rushing team in the SEC. Offensive line unit was horrid. Golding was the best coach. If they don't make it, which they won't, they only have a mirror to look in. That's just disrespectful. South Carolina being ranked over Ole Miss, so it's meaningless for Ole Miss to travel to South Carolina and beat them, so they rank South Carolina over Ole Miss. Well, we'll have to see it actually happen first, but the South Carolina push is comical. They are playing well, but people act like they should clearly jump multiple teams who beat them. That's what I can't get past. That's just that is my hang up. It's teams with identical records, and you're calling for South Carolina to jump 2 teams that beat them. They are making jumps over 2 teams with the same record in the same conference that beat them. You cannot make that logical. You can't. Let's face the facts. Ole Miss and South Carolina are both 9-3. Who won? Simple as that should be. The committee is going to ignore some of the things they said they value when they rank these teams, already have in some of these rankings. Absolutely. They make it up as they go along. They make it up as they go along. The committee only ranks most of these top 12 to 15 teams by win totals. If you had 1 or 2 losses, it wasn't recent, you can stay high no matter what. Yeah. Indiana and Notre Dame's resumes are pretty poor. USC could have tied that game late, but threw back-to-back pick sixes. Yeah, so what is it? Clemson, Indiana, Miami, and Notre Dame all have 0 ranked wins, right? Isn't it all 4? Or does Indiana... They beat Illinois, right? And Illinois is ranked. If not, they will be. So Indiana will have 1. Let me double check that. I love how I'm trying to type in Big Ten helmet schedule, and it brings up Big Ten hockey, because that's what I wanted, and that's what anybody would want when they're doing that. Okay, let's see. Indiana. They did not play Illinois. So, yeah, Indiana is also in that category. Indiana will have no ranked wins. Indiana's best win is Michigan. And that was at home, and they won by 5. It's a 5-loss Michigan team. It's their best win. Don't know if Notre Dame losing would have been enough. Probably not for brand power, but for resume should have been. Georgia Tech winning only would have mattered if Georgia lost this upcoming week. That is true. They would have needed to lose twice. Can we talk about how Texas both looked pretty good, minus turnovers, and A&M peed down their own leg from 7-1 to Texas 8-4 yet again, but it's okay because they have a fatter Jimbo on the sideline? Yeah, I mean, they were, without the turnovers, they were going to be totally non-competitive on their home field. Completely and totally non-competitive. We all know they will put Ohio State and Alabama ahead of Ole Miss. I mean, Ohio State has a win at Penn State. They have a win over Indiana, who's top 10. They're, the Michigan loss is certainly not good, but the other loss is at the number 1 team in the country by, 2 points? Ohio State belongs ahead of Ole Miss. They do. I think if they lined up today and played, I'm not totally convinced that Ohio State would win that game. But the Ohio State has a good resume. I mean, that Indiana win, I know you might roll your eyes at it, but that's a top 10 win, top 11 win, or whatever. Beat Penn State on the road. That's a top 10 win on the road. And one of their losses is by a field goal to the number one team in the country. Don't think Texas is going to beat Georgia. Still not very impressed by Ewers. Me either. Let Kirby Smart tell his team they're going 7-5 again. Yeah. What bowl are we thinking for Ole Miss? I'd probably take whoever their opponent is to win. You know what's kind of interesting, though, about bowl games now is you can get a glimpse into the future. Now, I know the transfer portal is a thing, and a lot of guys leave and stuff, and you bring in a lot of guys as well, so you might not know who's on your roster fully. But let's say that Princely and Ivy opt out. Wouldn't it be great to get a good long look at Cam Franklin? I mean, wouldn't that be good for him? I know people roll their eyes at the extra practices, but don't you think that would be really beneficial for a guy that understandably didn't get to play a whole lot when it mattered this year because he has two surefire NFL guys in front of him and he was a true freshman? But don't you want to see Austin Simmons if Jackson Dart would have opted out, which I would be surprised if he did, but still, let's just pretend. Wouldn't that be cool to get that look? I mean, you got that with Nico last year in Tennessee, right? I mean, they got to build so much hype around this guy because of the bowl game. And I mean, the same scenario can be created. I do think that if bowls have a say in who they get, which I think they do, Ole Miss might not be the sexiest pick just because of the disappointment. But I don't know that. It seems most logical. Notre Dame can control who they play and lost at home to Northern Illinois. Doesn't seem right that they get in over these SEC schools. No, but they only have a 1 in the loss column. That helps a lot. Like button. Yeah, hit the like button. Leave a comment as well. By the way, the podcast is brought to you in part by Advantage Business Systems. Check them out online at absms.com. Advantage Business Systems has you covered for all of your Mississippi office technology needs. Tell them I sent you. You'll get a complimentary office technology assessment. So you tell them what you need and what your budget is. Anything office technology, anywhere in Mississippi. You'll get an assessment on me, absms.com. The podcast is also brought to you by Priority One Bank. They make you their priority every single day with their online banking platform. It's a one-stop shop. All you need is an internet connection, and you can do whatever it is that you need to do with your money because Priority One Bank makes you their priority. Judkins in Big Ten play only ran for 464 yards and 3 touchdowns, and that's with significantly more carries than Henderson. No 100-yard games. The rare breakup where both sides lost. Penn State, of course, gets an unearned spot in the Big Ten title. Oregon should handle them. I think they should too. Is what it is. Coaching killed the season, not the players. I do agree there. Saw the argument that if Clemson wins, South Carolina should be in with a win over the ACC champ. Meanwhile, Ole Miss and Bama beat South Carolina and Georgia, who will likely be the SEC champ. Yeah, and again, I would be doing the same thing. Like if I were a South Carolina fan, I would be absolutely doing the exact same thing. I would be twisting my brain into pretzels. I would be talking about refs and all that stuff. I would. But the arguments for South Carolina just don't hold. They don't carry weight under scrutiny. They're fun for TikTok videos. That they're great to clickbait podcasts. But when you really break down what it is, when you start talking about vibes and refs and stuff like that, you lose when you have head-to-head results to consider first. Strength of schedule does not matter as long as they get Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Alabama in every year. Notre Dame has one ranked win, Texas 8-4, and might not be ranked much longer. Texas would have won 34-0 without the turnovers. Yeah, 28, 34-0, something like that. What is the mood going to be on Freeze after this Iron Bowl loss? They looked really bad because they are really bad. No, the mood around there is pretty horrible right now. But I mean, in his post game press conference, he did the thing, man. He's keeping them locked in by talking about how great the recruiting class is. He's still selling that, and they're still buying it. In this era, if you're bad after year 2, it's on you. Because here's the thing, and this is what we've talked about with Ole Miss as well. Ole Miss did not maximize its offensive potential this year. Did they make bad personnel evaluations? They clearly did, right? But can you look at the Ole Miss offense this year and think they got every ounce out of that team? They just weren't good enough. But the coaching, they were set up as best as they possibly could have been, and the players just weren't good enough. No, you cannot say that. Same thing with Auburn. Do you think that Hugh Freeze got the most out of this team and all he's missing is just a little help? No, you can't say that. Milroe was awful and Auburn couldn't take advantage of it. Yeah, 3 first-half turnovers. Oof. When do you think we can expect some news on possible staff changes? It's a good question. Probably after signing day and portal stuff, if they happen. Bowl games are the new spring games. It's not the worst way to look at them. It's really not. Saw Brian Kelly said after the game they are playing for the national title next year. Yeah, I saw that too. That clip will definitely not be used against him. You think Kiffin will regret how he handled this year for a long time? There will be parts of what they did that will sting. Absolutely. Should the SEC stay at an 8-game conference schedule? Absolutely, they should. The committee has told them, don't play difficult games. Strength of schedule doesn't matter. Why would you give your conference half of your league another loss? Why would you give 8 more losses to your conference? You guarantee 8 more losses to your conference. Why would you do that? There's no reason for that. Why the committee has told you not to do it. No reason to. If only they played Florida earlier in the season when they were bad. They are playing like a ranked team with Lagway in there now. No kidding. Florida beats Georgia, too, if he doesn't get hurt in that game. Lagway's the truth. The SEC should stay at 8 games at all costs. Now, the question would be, how long can we rotate opponents without losing rivalry games? I don't really care. You know, I don't mean I don't care about your message. I mean, I don't care about preserving certain rivalry games. I care about playoffs. That's what I care about. That's what I want to cover. I want to cover playoff teams. You know how you get there? Stay at 8 conference games. I say cover loosely, by the way. I'm not a beat writer. I'm not going to pretend to be one either. No, that's not what I do. I just talk. I just yap. And for some reason, you guys are here. Thoughts on the flag planting fights across the country? Can I have 2 kind of contradictory thoughts at the same time? We have forgotten how to win. Winning with class is, I think it's important and it's a lost art, right? It's so, everything is so showy and look at me. And when did winning stop being enough? When did it change from I scored a touchdown, let me go back and love on the guys that helped me get to the end zone, as opposed to I got to the end zone, let me draw more attention to myself. Why do you need to plant flags on the 50? I don't know. I feel like we've lost the art of winning with class as well. However, if you're Ohio State and you don't want Michigan to plant their flag on your field, don't lose to them on your field. There's a very easy way to prevent Michigan from planting flags on your field. Don't lose to them. And getting all hot and bothered and acting tough after they beat you down on your home field is also lame. And then Ryan Day's quote after the game, I mean, he was defending his guys, I guess, but we're not letting them do that on our field. Well, you let them beat you on your field. Well, why are you showing fight now? Why didn't you show fight when, the clock was running? So bring back the East and West division. I think that's a bad idea. I think it's a bad idea because you could have a down year in a division and have a 4-loss team make the SEC championship. You don't want that. Recruiting has worked for Florida. I mean, yes, they got better as the year went on, certainly. Billy saved his job and he earned it, but they still lost 5 games this year. Florida's better coach than Auburn. 100% they are. Why not go to a 7-game conference schedule? Why not? Why not? Let's go for it. Why not? Do I think Lane realizes he handled the running back room poorly? I do not. I don't. Football coaches and idiots like me, sometimes we have egos. I'm not a football coach. I'm looping myself into that so it doesn't sound like I'm picking on him because I have been wrong and I've doubled down on my wrongness. It happens. But ego is a real thing among coaches, and sometimes they are completely unwilling to see mistakes that they make. It happens. The South Carolina argument sadly doesn't matter since Bama will be ranked above both. I agree. Last team out really stings. You have to think if it switched to Ole Miss and Bama logos and the same results, then Bama would still be in. If only Bentley played more in Kentucky, LSU, and Florida, it might be 12-0 or 11-1 at best. I still think the issue for me is not that he didn't get 20 carries. It's that he was not afforded the opportunity to hit the home runs that he is certainly capable of, while they were trying to convince you that. So they played 2 walk-ons this year. The one that they played at the end of the year actually looked like he belonged on the field. But they played a walk-on that didn't have any business being on the field, and a converted wide receiver instead of a running back that has home run potential. That will be questioned forever, and it should be. It should be questioned forever. What do I think the future looks like for Ole Miss? A lot of Ole Miss fans are pessimistic for the future, but you think they will be good as long as they fire Charlie Weiss after this year. I know that there is a clear disappointment, and there should be a clear disappointment about this season and this team. It was playoff or bust. They're not going to make the playoff. Season's a bust. But as we've talked about a few times now, that doesn't mean the program is a bust. This season, they came up short. But what is there to be pessimistic about? They've won 38 games, could be 39 games in 4 years. Only 2 teams in the SEC have done that. 2 other teams in the SEC have done that. That's it. So there is stability. There is sustainability with them. The next thing is not getting to this point. It's how can they take the next step forward? How can Kiffin and company find consistency on offense? How can they do whatever they can to avoid somebody like Tulane coming open and taking Pete Golding from them? Right. That's the next thing. They've gotten to the point where they can sustain this level of success. They've gotten there. So now what can they do to avoid the lack of consistency? And I think that there needs to be some self-reflection on the part of the head coach to figure out why it's been the offense that has failed this team. But no, I mean, the sustainability is absolutely there. They've done it for 4 years now. Flag planting is a rivalry tradition. Yeah, I hear you, and I'm being a stick in the mud with this. But when did winning stop being enough? When did celebrating with your teammates stop being enough? Why does it have to go extra? Egg Bowl felt mostly chill this year. Is it just you or not having the extreme vitriol much more enjoyable? It is, and I mean, look, State going in at 2-9 certainly did not help that cause any. Interesting how all these fights and flag plantings happen more with all these portal players. It's almost as if a transfer can fall in love with your school and care about its traditions and the people around it. Look at Ole Miss. You think Chris Paul doesn't care about Ole Miss? Tell me the way he plays and the way he engages with people that he does not deeply care about Ole Miss. So that was always kind of a goofy narrative. Juice Wells was a bust, not a 2 or 3. I'm so surprised by that. He was great at South Carolina. Ole Miss is very healthy right now. They're winning around 9-10 games in the regular season yearly, and their rival is currently buried. Recruiting is good. They just have to be more consistent. That's it. That is the only thing preventing them. That's what it is, right? But the thing is, 2023 they would have made the playoff, right? But that is it. It's the lack of consistency on offense. That is, at least under Pete Golding, that is their issue. I think you kind of know what you're going to get defensively every week. And not kind of know. This season, you did know what you were going to get every week. It's all about now finding that consistency, figuring out offensive line, maybe making some schematic adjustments. I don't know. Do I think Dart has played his last game? I don't. I don't know this. It's not sourced. I'm just thinking out loud. I would be surprised if Jackson opted out of the bowl game, but maybe the ankle injury could cause him to do so. But if he does, then great audition for Austin Simmons, right? An opportunity to let Lane know that, I mean, you can go portal hunting, but it's my job, you know? Paul's a great player and a team leader. He should have an NFL career. He will. He will. That's an NFL linebacker for sure. If Charlie Weiss gets fired, who does Ole Miss get? This is a cop-out answer. I won't do that until that actually happens, because I just kind of feel like it would be a waste of energy until we know that it's worth talking about. And any chance Pete Golding gets snagged by some other school for a head coaching job, I think that list is small. Like Tulane would be one that I'd be worried about, frankly. I mean, he's making over $2 million. They'll give him a raise, I assume. He certainly has earned one. The head coach is not, but he's earned one. There's the family emotional tied to it. And again, I think that, even though it doesn't seem like, Lane's got one foot out of the door anymore. In fact, it feels like it's quite the opposite. I do think that there's an expectation that when Lane Kiffin ultimately leaves Ole Miss, Pete Golding will be on the short list to be his replacement, if not the favorite. So do you leave and take a G5 job or something, or West Virginia or something, just to have Ole Miss come open in a year and you're no longer there and you went 5-7 in your first year because you took a hard job and now you're not being considered anymore? Does Wells come back next year? There's been some talk about it. I think that it would serve him well to do so. He can play much better than he did this year. He absolutely can play better, and he needs to if he's going to play at the next level. Bunch of older guys who you don't see why they'd opt out. Yeah, it's just opt-outs have become all the rage, right? I mean, some people won't like me saying this. I don't think Walter Nolan needs to play. I mean, he's banged up. He's played banged up. He has put so much great things on tape. I would advise him not to play. I would advise him not to play. I would advise Jackson to play. Because he's not a first-round guy. And the intangible stuff is something that you're going to need to sell, right? Maybe overthinking that a little bit. Couldn't Kiffin call plays in a bowl game, or would they delegate that to someone else? I don't know. I don't know how they'd approach that. He can do either one. I don't think he wants to be the primary play caller. Haven't several G5 head coaches left to become assistants at Power 4 schools? Yes, that's something to keep an eye on. Like, if the OC job does come open, don't just limit yourself to OCs at other places. There are head coaches that would take that job. You've already seen it. So Pete Golding as a coach is so impressive. Obviously, don't know what he'd do with an offense, but he's very good on the defensive side and is so football savvy. And man, he's got great connections too, right? I mean, you would have to really like the prospects that you would have to coach his offense, and if that were to ever happen. So Dart, Bentley, Watkins, and some of the O-line, maybe McGee's and Ivy play. So, I mean, you had the one opt-out last year. Ended up kind of working out for him. McGee's and Ivy are in that fringe spot where I think they're guaranteed to be on an NFL roster next year, but they're not like the early round picks. But, I mean, they would benefit by showing up to the Senior Bowl healthy more so than playing against Illinois or whoever. 5 to 6 opt-outs, yeah, maybe a little bit more even. Maybe a little bit more. And then the portal thing is going to happen as well. So that's what, 9 days away, 8 days away. So we'll see what happens there. I got to run. Thank you guys so much as always. So Tuesday. So on Tuesday, basketball team has a big game that starts at 8:00. So I am going to record something around the playoff rankings, just kind of like a closure thing, just a quick like final thoughts on that. And then I will do something after the basketball game as well. Neither of which will be live. It's too messy with basketball playing at 8:00. So it'll be recorded on Tuesday. Post-game basketball thoughts. That's a big game. That is a big game on Tuesday. So, and then we'll be back live on Thursday. So see y'all then. Thank you so much for tuning in. Like the video, all that good stuff, and I'll see you guys on Tuesday.